What's going on, everybody? V-Lion here, and welcome back to another episode of Kerbal Space Program. I'm sitting here in the tracking station, just looking over my handiwork. Since last episode, I've expanded my communications network. We started off with these 3 synchronous satellites around Kerbin. We moved on, we added some satellites around the Mun in an equatorial orbit, and added 3 more in a polar orbit. And we went ahead and we did the same at Minmus. You can see here we've got a ton of satellites. We even have some that aren't related to a communications network. We just put them there for contracts, and I don't feel like removing them from the tracking station. This also means that we're not going to have any trouble communicating with any vessel anywhere on either the Mun or Minmus. The equatorial orbits take care of most of the Mun and Minmus. You can cover most of the body that way, but for the extreme points on the poles, we have those satellites in a polar orbit, and those are pretty much covered as well. Most importantly, now we have a fancy light show. Kick it! So the game is pushing us to do a flyby of Duna. Here we have the Explore Duna contract right here. It sounds simple enough, but we want to make sure that we have everything prepared. We want to make sure we have enough Delta V to get there and to get back from Duna. Now, instead of just building a ridiculously huge rocket with tons of boosters and wasting a ton of money on that, what we want to do is build a smaller rocket that will be able to refuel after we launch from Kerbin and then take it the rest of the way to Duna. And for that, we want to build a staging area on Minmus. Now what we're going to need in order to make a staging area on Minmus is we're going to need to mine ore from it. In order to find that ore, we are going to need to launch an M700 survey scanner in a polar orbit above Minmus, and that's going to be the first step in helping us detect where ore is so that we can mine it and then convert it into liquid fuel, oxidizer, monopropellant, anything we could need. And what we're going to try to do, we need to build a satellite with a surveyor on it and set it up into a polar orbit of Minmus. Okay, so I'm in the spaceplane hangar and I have a regular Mark II cockpit and the double-length storage bay just to show you. Going into the science section, and here's the survey scanner, and just look at how big it is compared to the cockpit and the storage container, which again is a double-sized storage container. So whatever we're going to make, it's going to be way too big for just one storage container. We're probably going to need to go 2, maybe 1.5. Either way, we're going to need some space for this. Now, at this point of the game, I like to focus a little less on designing the vehicles because, you know, whatever you design, you know, there's always going to be the little thing that you may have messed up, and I want to focus more on the missions themselves and flying the planes. So I use some resources, mainly a site called KerbalX.com, where people upload their craft files and you can download them. You can download them into the spaceplane hangar, vehicle assembly building. You can download them as sub-assemblies, and you can filter all the uploads by part count and what kind of use it has, what kind of parts it has. So that's what I'm going to do for the satellite and for the single stage to orbit vessel that we're going to use in order to launch that satellite into a polar Minmus orbit. So I went to KerbalX.com and I found a design for a satellite that I liked. Here's it right now, WO satellite. And it has a survey scanner, it even has some antenna. It has some science that I don't think I really need, and in fact I end up ditching the Science Junior and the Goocans and all the other scientific equipment on it. It has some monopropellant tanks and some RCS thrusters all around, which help the maneuverability, and of course the batteries and solar panels that you need in order to use the survey scanner. It also has a docking port, meaning it's going to be very easy to attach it to whatever my launch vehicle is going to be. So here's the finished product. I end up saving it as a sub-assembly so I can easily attach it to my launch vehicle. And I'm saving it, here we go, small survey satellite. That's it. You can really use the KerbalX.com site not only to help you find crafts and just take out all the hassle out of designing, but also to give you some inspiration for designs. Like, I wouldn't have been able to come up with this design on my own, but seeing a different product with a similar design, like with the Science Junior and everything, that really helped. So the next stage is we need a launch vehicle, and what we're doing today is we're going to make a single stage to orbit vehicle, or SSTO. And I actually downloaded one off of KerbalX, or actually from a different Kerbal Space Program forum. Here it is, the Mun Phantom 2.1, or actually it was the Mun Phantom 2. I just changed it a bit, so I changed it to 2.1. And it's a basic SSTO design. I swapped out a crew cabin for those 2 cargo bays right there. And what an SSTO basically is, it basically means that what we see in front of us right now is what's going to be launching in full from Kerbin and going to be landing back on Kerbin. And the way that it does that, right here, you can see I'm just opening up to make sure that I can fit in the redesigned satellite that I made. I'm taking out the old one, putting in the new one. The thing about an SSTO is that you pick up speed in atmosphere at the beginning using air-breathing jet engines, and after you get to high enough altitude, you switch to liquid fuel engines. And that helps you save a lot of liquid fuel on your way up. As you can see here, I'm having a little trouble connecting the satellite to somewhere on my cargo bay. What you can do in this situation, you can press I believe it's the A key, and that is snap node to node, basically. So you see those green dots there, those are nodes. And if you press A while moving apart, then it'll make sure that those snap together from the part you're moving and the part you're trying to place it on. And now, what you need basically for an SSTO, you need intakes. We have some shock cone air intakes, the best in the game. Right here, we have about 4 of them. We have 4 R.A.I.P.E.R engines, the top tier R.A.I.P.E.R engines, and those are a special kind of engine because they can switch between an air-breathing jet engine mode and a closed cycle mode that uses liquid fuel and oxidizer. And that way you're going to save a lot of weight on your craft. You're going to save a lot of actual oxidizer when launching it, because for most of the ascent up above Kerbin, you're going to be running on air-breathing engines for the first 30 or so kilometers up. And as you can see here, I'm just adjusting the placement of the cargo bays, the docking bays, everything, just so that it fits well enough and that I don't have any problems. What I didn't do here, and what I'm going to do for future launches, is I'm going to place some extra battery packs in the cargo bay, just so that when I ditch my payload, I still have enough battery power and battery storage that I'm not looking every single second to renew my electricity. Because it's especially hard because the R.A.I.P.E.R engines don't actually generate electricity. The atomic motors that we have on the end do, and that was actually good. You'll see later in the video, because it helped us renew some of the power. But the R.A.I.P.E.R engines, which were the main form of actually generating thrust while in atmosphere, don't generate any electricity. So that was a big problem when I was actually trying to land the SSTO. So you can see here, I'm just doing some touch-ups, just making sure everything's in place. I actually took the entire craft and turned it upside down for everything except the cockpit, just to make sure that everything is in place. And I see that the antenna is sticking out a little. So I tried to push that back in as far as I can without making it look too ugly. We still kept 1 relay antenna and 1 direct antenna, just for aesthetic purposes. I think we could just go with 1 relay antenna and that would be fine. But just in case there's a patch that ever comes out that makes needing both a relay and a direct necessary, we have that. And once again, the atomic motors that we have on the back, those don't use oxidizer or intake air, they just use liquid fuel, and they are incredibly efficient in a vacuum. The only problem is they have a very low thrust, so they take a very long time to perform even the smallest maneuvers. But it's well enough. We just have a little bit of oxidizer in the middle of the craft. We have our 4 R.A.I.P.E.R engines, 2 atomic engines. We have the control surfaces for actually controlling the plane in atmosphere. To move the plane when we're in the vacuum, we do have a reaction wheel in the cockpit, so that's nice. And that's about it, really. You just need to make sure you have enough liquid fuel. You have a bit of oxidizer for that little bit of takeoff where you're still in the atmosphere, but you're too high up in the atmosphere for air-breathing engines. That's important. And here I'm just going through my custom action groups. I have action groups to toggle the engines, each the R.A.I.P.E.Rs and the atomic motors separately on and off. We have a button to toggle between the cycle modes of the R.A.I.P.E.R engines, to close and open the air intakes, to open the cargo bays, to detach the satellite, to open the communications antenna and solar panel on the SSTO, and we decide to send Jebediah and Bill up. Now, there are a few tricks that you need to remember when flying an SSTO. First of all, when you take off, you want to pitch up to about a 15-degree inclination, and you want to hold that for a while. You want to let your R.A.I.P.E.R engines get up above 400 meters per second, because that's when they actually start outputting a lot of power and their speed starts increasing much faster. Once your altitude reaches about 10,000 meters, you want to level off and start building up speed so that when you reach 20,000 meters, you can actually have enough speed to escape the atmosphere. Once that happens, you can also engage your atomic motors because their efficiency is going to be up. And eventually your R.A.I.P.E.Rs are going to shut down by themselves. They're going to switch from air breathing to closed cycle. That's when you also want to close the air intakes because those provide a lot of drag, and you want to burn as much of your liquid fuel and oxidizer as you can. You want to tilt up to about 30 degrees, and once you have an orbit that's outside the atmosphere, you want to start burning to actually circularize your orbit with the atomic rocket motors. Those take a long time to complete their maneuvers, so you want to actually, even if it's going to take you 4 minutes to get to your maneuver node, you want to start burning almost right away. Here what we're doing is we're just changing our inclination to match that of Minmus. And you can see it's still taking a very long time to burn about 250 meters per second. It took us at least like 80 seconds to do it according to the information on screen. And now we have our plane aligned with Minmus. We can actually try to do a maneuver to Minmus. Unfortunately, I had a problem here where the MUN was getting in the way, so I wasn't able to get a nice encounter. So I just went to the tracking station, sped up time, and then I set myself up a transfer. Here I'm going, it's giving me a very nice equatorial orbit. Of course I want a polar orbit, but that's not a problem. We'll start off equatorial, and once we get halfway of the way to Minmus, we can burn about a few meters per second and change it to a polar orbit, and I'll show you how in just a moment. And you can see here, this is taking a super long time, several minutes of burning with these atomic rocket motors to get us to an encounter with Minmus. Some people prefer to split their maneuver to Minmus into stages. You split it into thirds, and each time you go around your periaps, you perform another third. And that's using the R.A.I.P.E.R effect, which basically means the closer you are to your periaps, the more effect your thrust will have. So here we are, my orbit's a little wider than I wanted, so I just nudge the prograde vector a bit until I get it right where I want. And then here I had a problem, which is why quick saves are your friends. I had a problem where once I got to the place, you see I'm changing my maneuver when I'm about halfway the way to Minmus, and I'm just adding some normal vectoring and some retrograde vectoring, and that's getting me the desired effect. The only problem is when I did my burn, my solar panel ended up being faced away from the sun, which led to me losing a lot of battery power, and I needed to quick save, quick load, and just make sure that my craft was angled with the solar panel facing it, because I don't want to burn those rocket motors because that'll change my orbit and I'll have to correct it, and it's a problem, and in the future I'm just going to need to add more batteries. So we finally made it to Minmus, and here I am just fixing the inclination of my orbit so that it's exactly 90 degrees, giving us a perfectly polar orbit. And once that's done, we can launch our satellite. So the important thing to remember about the survey scanner is that for each celestial body, it has a different range of orbits that it works in. For instance, In Minmus, I think it's somewhere between 50,000 meters and 300,000 meters. So here I am at a 67,000 meter orbit, so that's good enough. Here I am opening my cargo bay doors, and then I launch the satellite. Just press 7 on the action groups key, and that detaches, and then I switch to it, and I'm just waiting for it to clear the cargo bay so that I can extend those solar panels without them getting busted. And I have it all in one key press. You see here, they're all opening, the survey scanner, the solar panels, the antenna, everything's good. And that's it. You launch it, and you just have to press a few buttons just to make sure it does the orbital survey. I'm, right now for aesthetic purposes, making it point directly towards the planet using the radial out vector. And here we go. So opening the surveyor's context menu here, we have a few different buttons. You see here, if I try to do the resource scan first, it doesn't give me any information or any signs to send, but if I do the perform orbital survey first, you see here it's sending the data, I get some signs from that, and now if I go and do a resource scan, we can see that we actually do get some signs from it. So we go ahead, we transmit that, and now we also have this neat overlay in the map view of Minmus. Those are all the places where the ore is, although it doesn't show us in what concentrations. But we do have these different ways of showing it. We have this, I think this is heat map blue. I can't really see what's written in the video at this moment. There is heat map green, heat map blue, and there's a few different ways you can show the ore. Here we have heat map blue, I think, no, green. And you can see it shows higher concentrations of ores in different colors. And it also shows you that you don't really have a lot of ore in those flat areas, which, makes sense. They're lakes and not really mountains. And there are also those buttons that say cutoff plus and cutoff minus. And what those do is they change the amount of ore you'll be able to see in map view. And now you see we press plus, and that raises the number next to the button above it. So you have 0%, 10%, up to 100%. And that basically dictates the threshold. And if you have ores in a concentration below that threshold, you aren't going to see them in the map view. Like here we have it up high, I think around 60 or something, if I'm reading this right. And if you bump it up to 100, you won't see anything. Like here, right now, it's bumped up to 100, we aren't seeing anything, but we can move that back down to 70, and that's just showing us where the highest concentrations are, which is good. It can help us pick a better staging area, but we may not feel that that's too important. We may think, oh, okay, so I'll just stick more drills on there. I just want a lower concentration, just have an easier landing zone. Which again, all of this is entirely up to the player. They can decide where they want their landing zone, their mining area to be based on the results of the survey. They can decide if they want a higher ore concentration or an easier landing zone. That's entirely up to you. Me personally, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. As of the time of recording this, I haven't actually sent my miner there or actually built a miner, but we'll see as the series goes on. But now what we want to do is we want to send our SSTO back to Kerbin. You can see here I noticed that I didn't have a lot of battery storage space on my craft left after I launched my satellite, so I'm making sure to angle my solar panel as much to the sun as I can to get as much power as I can just to keep the lights on, as it were. Now getting back to Kerbin is pretty simple. Even though we're in a polar orbit, our polar orbit is still facing along Minmus's orbit, meaning it's very easy for us to point along the back of the orbit, to burn along the anti-direction of Minmus's orbit and get back into an equatorial orbit of Kerbin. And we're aiming for a periapse of about 55,000 meters here, just so that we can pass through the atmosphere, burn off a little of that speed, and every time we do, we're going to be lowering our apoaps until it's about the right height, until it's a regular height above Kerbin that we can just start our landing procedure from there. Now you can see here when we're burning along the back of Minmus's orbit in order to return to Kerbin, we don't actually need a lot of delta V. a little less than 200 meters per second is enough for us, which is great. And we get a very equatorial orbit, which is very helpful for us if we want to land back at the Kerbal Space Center. And here you can see I had to quick load just because I shot past Kerbin and it didn't actually register. And here we are, we're lowering into the atmosphere, and pretty soon we're at 90 kilometers, and here we are at 70, and in a few moments our craft is going to start experiencing re-entry heat, and you can see our apoaps is dropping. It already dropped past the Mun's orbit, and there we are, we're getting back above the atmosphere. It's going to take us a few passes to do that, because every time we go through the atmosphere, go about 55 kilometers up, our apoaps lowers by about 2/3, and it just keeps dropping and dropping. It's going to take us multiple passes, basically. So here, after what felt like my 8th or 20th pass through the atmosphere, you can see here I actually lower my landing gear and open my bay doors just to provide even more drag when I'm passing through the atmosphere. My apoaps got down to about 150,000 meters, and I decided, well, that's enough. And now when I get to my apoaps, I'm going to raise my periaps up to above the atmosphere, up to over 70,000 meters. And from there, I'm just going to start planning my descent to Kerbin. I'm first of all raising my periaps to a safe distance, and then I'm manually lowering my apoaps down to a reasonable height as well. And then what I do, because at the moment I just want to make sure that the Space Center was in the daylight side, I just went to the tracking station, fast forwarded time a bit, and now here I am. I burnt, you didn't actually manage to see that in the map screen, but I burnt so that I was pointing to a little ways to the plateau to the east of the Kerbal Space Center. Here you see I'm just shooting straight past the Kerbal Space Center. I overshot it by a bunch, and I'm actually losing control of my plane. I lost control totally, but I just wait for everything to calm down. I managed to kick the engines in, and I managed to get control back of my plane, and I start heading back towards the Kerbal Space Center. And you see here, I actually lose control again trying to turn because this plane is very light with a lot of kick to it, especially when I'm running those air-breathing R.A.I.P.E.Rs. They go very fast. But here I am again. I managed to get myself on target, and it's going to take me a while, but I still manage it. By the way, important note, I'm going to reiterate this again. Quick saves and quick loads are your friends. Maybe even the alt quick save, alt quick load, just so you can name your quick saves and pick which one you want to do. That's very important. Here you can see, even though I'm only about 4,000 meters above sea level, I'm already, there we go, I'm over 1,000 meters per second in speed. I'm going way too fast. At this rate, you know, I may just go up out of the atmosphere again. But here we see the Kerbal Space Center. I quick save again, and I attempt my landing. Here we are. Now, this was hard for me just because I'm very bad at landing on a very narrow strip like the runway. I prefer big, open, flat fields like you have on Minmus and all around the Kerbal Space Center. Those are more my jam. But here we go. I'm trying to decelerate now because I'm coming in way too fast, even getting those air effects. You see that white all along my hull? That's just the air whipping around my craft. Here we go. I'm lowering my speed. In fact, when I reach shore, I think I kill my speed entirely. And I'm also trying to angle my craft so that I actually get to the runway and on it, like the runway itself, and don't have any problems. Here we go. And I've killed all my speed, and I'm still going way too fast. And it looks like I'm about to crash here, but no. I just flare up. I flare even way too much. And I have to correct myself, and here I go back down. And I turn on my brakes, and we managed to touch down and immediately start rolling off the runway. So here I do a little turn, and that's it. We've landed. We went in one stage, one craft went up into space and came back down safely to the Kerbin Space Center. And that is the magic of SSTOs. And now Jebediah is just stepping outside, breathing that sweet, sweet Kerbin air. And we managed it. We set ourselves a goal, we completed it, And all we have to do is now recover the craft. And you can see that recovering the craft, we managed to recover, since we landed back at the Kerbal Space Center, about 85,000 Kerbin dollars. And I checked the price of the craft afterwards, and it came to about 90,000. So the only money we wasted was on fuel and oxidizer, and that's it. That's the only money we're never going to see again. But that's great. We can save a lot of money that way. And that's where we're going to end the video today. Guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to click that like button, click that subscribe button, leave a comment down below, and hit that bell notification icon. And I will see you all next time. Peace.